My name's Mark Ricci. I'm from the University of Delaware in the MPA program.
Hello all, my name is Christophe Combemal. I'm in the Accelerated Master's Program for Public Policy and Management at Heinz College, Carnegie Mellon University.
Hi all, my name is Zana Augustin, doing public management at Johns Hopkins.
Hi, I'm Zachary Blackburn at the Batten School at the University of Virginia.
All right, we're here to present our strategy to you guys. Hopefully it's a learning experience as it was to us. Okay, our strategy mainly focused on hinging the fact that we wanted to create diverse mixed programs for funding, for economic prosperity for the disadvantaged groups, as well as see long-term effects. We found that the initial investment of 120 million wasn't enough for the complexities of the 7 initiatives to meet the 5 metrics. And so in the process, we decided to hinge on the fact that we had reinvestment savings and use that in order to achieve those 5 metrics and deal with the complexities of the 7 initiatives and achieve sustainability as well. So in the process, we ended up achieving economic prosperity for disadvantaged groups as well as preventative and managed care. And so in that process, we decided to split our strategy into 2 categories. It started off with funding sources that addressed reinvest the savings, and then moved to the CGP plan, and then reinvest the negotiated split of healthcare cost savings. And then we moved to proactive initiatives, which were more on a secondary base, looking at the long-term effects and returns from that, from the first funding sources, which we decided to create family pathways for advantages, create medical homes, support self-care and coordinate healthcare. And I'll pass it over to Zach.
So our proposal performed well against all of the 5 key criteria that were identified earlier. And we wanted to make sure that it was a balanced strategy that addressed all of the different criteria. And so here you can see sort of the results that we got. And I'm going to highlight 5 of the key impacts that meet these 5 criteria. So first you can see that our proposal reduces overall healthcare costs by over 17%. So this is a pretty substantial cost savings. I think it was somewhere in the realm of $5 billion. There's a reduction in severe physical illness by 20%, and there's also a reduction in mental illness by about 25%. And then in terms of the quality of care, you can see the adequacy for chronic care is up 38.9%. So this is making a big difference for people who are living day to day with chronic care conditions. And then also the business communities can be on board. We're able to boost productivity by 10%, and worker care costs are down by over 12%. So that's something the business community is going to be very excited about. And then lastly, we really wanted to make sure that equity was a key concern, something that was really driving everything that we were doing. And so you can see through the Pathways program that we had for families, there's over 20% reduction in poverty in our community. And so that's something that we think is really exciting for this proposal. And so now drilling down a little bit on specifically how we scored against these 5 criteria, you can see that we scored well against all of them, and especially well in terms of productivity. And we wanted to make sure that it was a balanced approach, and although productivity was much higher, we believe the reason that's happening is because when you get cost savings, that means society doesn't have to spend as much on healthcare. That can be applied back into the economy, and so that's increasing productivity. The same with increased care, people spending less time in the hospital, then they're more productive. And again, those are all sort of leading into productivity gains. And so you can see here the pretty big results, increase in net productivity of over $15 billion for a town of only 300,000. And net costs are down $5.5 billion more or less. So these are pretty substantial impacts that we're excited to see.
Thanks. I'd like to talk a bit now about some of the trade-offs that we identified between proposal effectiveness and political feasibility. We realize the political feasibility for a model of this nature is going to require 2 things. 1, stakeholder commitment. We want to make sure that stakeholders are either in favor or at the very least not strongly against us as much as possible. Second, we want to make sure that looking outside the scope of the simulation, that what we're doing is politically feasible, that it resonates with the culture that a middle American town would have. And so our initial solution, which, as you'll see here, has a significant effect on hospital operating margin, had a score right around here. And that solution was essentially to create a contingent global payment system, which affected all three aspects of the healthcare service market. We were looking at Medicare, Medicaid, and commercial service. Essentially, we replaced fee-for-service. Now, this was very effective. We saw a significant reduction in healthcare cost, dramatic improvement in healthcare quality. Unfortunately, it also meant a substantial loss for the hospitals. Their operating margin fell precipitously relative to the baseline, never really recovered. We realized that this was going to keep the hospitals from ever supporting what we were doing. And at the same time, we saw a similar effect for specialists. We saw that their average income fell dramatically as well, that they were taking something on the order of a 21% salary cut. And finally, we realized that it's not politically feasible in America to say that you're going to essentially socialize the commercial free market element of a healthcare service. Getting rid of fee-for-service is incredibly controversial in that regard. So we realized that by removing the commercial aspect of our CGP program, by keeping fee-for-service in the commercial sphere, whilst at the same time ensuring that the benefits of CGP were offered to Medicare and Medicaid patients, that we could dramatically improve healthcare outcomes and profit outcomes for hospitals. You'll see right around here, this was our solution. Hospital profit margins not only improved, but actually came considerably above the baseline. We saw an improvement by 2040 of about 125%. In other words, the hospitals have no reason to oppose this. They're getting better health outcomes and better profitability. Specialists were a more difficult case for us. You'll see right here that our solution is still below the baseline. They're still taking a pay cut, somewhere on the order of 16%. What we realized, however, is that the best we can do is mitigate the damage to the specialists. We couldn't entirely do away with the loss to their salary. At the same time, however, we also recognize that a small town like Urbis, or a mid-sized town like Urbis, can benefit from revitalization, that improvements in productivity and healthcare will enable it to form a new economy, of which the specialist's profession can be one of many cornerstones. That there are positive externalities which affect the specialists. Improved healthcare means better productivity, means more wealth, means less crime, means better property values, and ultimately gives them, as stakeholders in their community, not merely in their profession, a reason to support this program. Now, let's talk a bit about some of the trade-offs here. As I've mentioned, political feasibility is twofold. One, politics in general, and two, our specific stakeholders. So our initial solution was to have CGP, commercial, and Medicare 100% covered. For task 3, we changed it to the elimination of the CGP component of our program and reducing CGP Medicare to about 50%. This enabled hospitals to retain 2 of their primary profit generators. We also noticed, however, that there were downsides. Per capita cost went up slightly as hospitals captured more of that value. Deaths and health status were still dramatically improved, but somewhat less so. And overall, we realized that there were 2 major trade-offs. Quality of care and cost of care were both adversely affected when we moved to this program. We realized, however, that though these dimensions are important, it's best to have a feasible program that can get us somewhere than a non-feasible program that can promise us everything.
So as we look forward, through our discussions, we strongly relied on the ability to understand whether our implementation options were politically feasible both in the short run and the long run. And that's kind of how we examined our policies. In the short run, we wanted to be able to create an infrastructure with the initial $120 million that would then sustain our goals in the long run past the first 5 years. So as you saw earlier, we were able to turn $120 million investment into almost a $1.7 billion surplus that we were able to use in order to change health behaviors in Urbis. We realized that changing health behaviors was not something we could accomplish in 5 years. And our first actual implementation of the $120 million was to invest all of it into changing health behaviors. And we realized by years 5 and 6, we ran out of money and people reverted back to their old ways. So the initial investment of our money was to create an infrastructure, which was the reinvestment savings plan, in order to gain this large surplus, which then we could use in order to make things more politically feasible when engaging with stakeholders. One of those stakeholders happened to be the hospital, which we were able to actually drive their profit margins up, even though revenues fell. Another stakeholder, as Christoph just explained, was the specialists. And again, specialists, what we have decided is our our huge surplus, our $1.7 billion surplus into 2040, while we realize that that is not a guaranteed amount of money, but we have the infrastructure in place to have a surplus, which greatly helps us going forward. We can use that surplus in order to incentivize research and development, whether that be with specialists transitioning more into research as opposed to practice. We can actually have that money to be able to be used for people who are looking to implement policies, can actually come to us, propose ideas, and we can actually help fund those. Again, our initial investment of just $120 million turned into a $1.7 billion profit or surplus. So we realize what that money could mean for policy moving forward and how it has sustained us past the 5- and 6-year mark that we originally saw. We also realize that the mechanism for creating that infrastructure of $1.7 is a management issue that we're going to have going forward. So that's something we will examine, is how that money will actually be managed, how it will be marketed, and how we will interact with stakeholders as we go forward. And then again, we're just reiterating kind of what actually led us to transition from looking to tackle behavioral health in those first 5 years, which we realized was not feasible, is to attacking behavioral health over a 25 to 30-year period and creating infrastructure in the initial investment. Again, we have a focus on behavioral health. We had a large focus on low-income disadvantaged communities, which paid off in years 10, 15, and 20. And then our proposal, again, scored a 335.19, which was lower than our highest score, but we realized we gained political feasibility by lowering our expectations. Thank you very much.